Yeah, there was, I got a comment during construction that we should take that left arrow and make it into a U-turn arrow.
Because you really cannot make a left turn when you go into that roundabout.
Well, it becomes a matter of semantics. One can physically.
Yeah, but we're not gonna
left.
argue about semantics when you're in a car heading at 25 miles an hour.
Yeah, it would be nice if they were going 25.
Yeah,
And they get to that circle.
right.
People go into it pretty fast.
So, yeah, I guess we should think about what that should really be. I don't think it's accurate the way it's currently
It's
configured.
really
Okay.
misleading.
You're talking about the same thing, he's talking about the eastbound?
Yeah, I think so.
No,
Like this-
the picture you,
Oh,
Westbound.
not
that's
that.
that's northbound.
No, you're
That's
eastbound.
coming in from the west looking.
No, that's coming in from Craig's.
Oh,
Piccadilly
that's coming
Square's
northbound, oh,
over
right,
there.
thank you, that's northbound, yeah.
Oh, you're right, that
It's north.
is from Craig's
That is from
Drive,
Craig's.
Yeah,
which you can turn left there.
Right, that is correct.
around.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, this
It-
is
it
from,
needs to
this
be
is
that-
from
that
Craig, this
question
isn't
Question mark thing,
eastbound.
I agree, I wonder,
Okay,
is there a
do
reason
you
why
wanna,
they?
do you wanna go into the weeds on that right now? We can.
Probably, well, I don't know, not, we're starting the meeting, we're at public comment, welcome to the meeting, and we're reviewing, a comment, from Corey Bianca regarding the Donut House roundabout. And, so, do people wanna dig into I mean, we do respond to these public comments, so maybe, would you like to respond to her directly, or?
Sure, I'm happy to. I've fielded this question with other residents. I have an answer. Happy to send it on to Corey as well.
Yeah, I was misreading what the direction of the photo was. You can turn left there.
But you raised a separate point, which is valid. The left turn pavement marking for eastbound traffic on Mar19.
There's not many people who think that the roundabout goes the other way around. But just one of them every once in a while is a problem. Until people learn how to use a roundabout, seeing that turn left when no one's around, you could think to go the wrong way in the roundabout.
You could, but Wally, go with me to any other, let me see if I can be specific. Go to Highway 36, northbound, so you've driven by the parking structure,
Yeah,
and you wanna turn left onto Elkhorn.
yeah,
And so we have, in that case, we have two left turn lanes, but let's say you're in the outer left turn lane, and you have that pavement marking on the road.
yeah,
By this interpretation, that marking is telling you to turn left into your first opportunity, which would be into the opposing traffic heading eastbound on Elkhorn. The driver knows, no, you don't turn left immediately into the first available lane. You drive past the double yellow and turn into the lane that's headed west.
yeah.
So the
So-
driver knows that, and the driver also knows at a roundabout, you don't turn and travel contraflow around the circle, because you look ahead, you have a chevron and a one-way
A
sign right in
one-way
front of you.
sign, yes.
And so the driver knows you are able to make a left turn from this lane, don't make the immediate left into the circulatory roadway, look at the one-way sign right in front of you, go around the circle, and make your left turn. Now, there are pavement markings, we call them a fish hook.
Yeah.
They've got the left turn arrow, they put a dot in there, which is intended to communicate to the motorist, go around the central island.
Oh,
That pavement marking exists, and there's debate in the industry on whether to use it or not.
cause it confuses the people.
Because it's a
who don't-
new symbol that a motorist encounters. It's like, what am I supposed to do now? What does the dot mean? So we had this discussion at length with CDOT and Federal Highways when this was under design. I reached out to a third-party consultant and got their independent perspective on it. And the recommendation and consensus was, let's stick with conventional pavement marking arrows because those are most commonly understood by the majority of the traveling public.
Yeah.
So that's why we did not put a fish hook in.
But Wally raised that one car that goes left around the
And
wrong
that-
way.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's gonna happen every single day, no matter what pavement markings, no matter what signs.
Well,
I see them too.
I've
But there's
never-
nothing you can
I've
do.
never seen anybody go the wrong way in a roundabout in Estes Park. I know what happens.
They
And
go down
I
the
love
road,
the
yeah.
example because to me, that is a fantastic illustration of the safety of a roundabout. The most egregious thing, I think, that a person can do is go backwards through a roundabout.
Yeah, that's the
And
most
so,
dangerous.
do we kill people? Do we break cars? Generally not. We make people mad, they
Yeah.
get anxious, they flip each other off.
Yeah.
They figure out how to get around each other
And
because
then we talk
everyone's
about it
going
here.
slow.
Right.
If they're going
Yeah.
slow enough,
Right.
any stupidity is forgivable.
There you go. And so,
Moving right along.
there you,
Thank you, John.
so that's kind of the longer story, but I'm happy to explain all that to Corey.
Right. So another public comment, the topic was the Elkhorn Lodge Phase Two. There's a lot of discussion in the community about that development project, so he wrote in. He's a person who lives up off of Elm Road. So, I think he just really wanted to put the topic in front of us. So, anyway, he basically is pointing out concerns about the development, the transportation plan. Concern he wrote is like increased vehicular traffic, concern about emergency exit. And also, it's also a very steep road on Elm Road. And then another thing, he was saying that he's concerned about the increase in traffic in that area. Specifically Highway 36 and Elm Road, going on to Marine Avenue, looks like. So, anyhow, since, I know we haven't really talked about that project, and I don't know if we should make a comment or recommendation or anything like that, but, I know there is on the town website, on, proposals for projects, you can go there and there's just a wealth of information about the proposal for this development project. And, also public comment is there apparently. And I know Joan has, been very engaged in it, so you always ask Joan as well, but, anyhow, it is sort of interesting, that road that they're thinking about putting in. I don't have an opinion on it, but I just, bring people's awareness. And then I think, Tuesday, at the town board meeting, we'll be discussing it more, is my understanding, is that correct?
My understanding is that what's happening on Tuesday is that they're just going to consider asking the question for annexation. Do the owners of the property under consideration want to be annexed? I believe that's all they're talking about on
Okay.
Tuesday.
We're just talking about annexation.
Just annexation.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
not even the whole picture, but just the very first piece of it.
Can I offer some thoughts on this?
You may, please.
Thank you. I think this question puts TAB in a potentially awkward position, certainly a new position. And what I mean by that is TAB in the past has not been expected or ever asked to weigh in on issues or transportation issues associated with new development. That has been outside of the purview of TAB. This request is an invitation for TAB to get engaged in citizen concerns associated with a land use application. So it could be a catalyst for a philosophical discussion. Should TAB expand its area of concern and input into land use application matters? From time to time over the years, I can think of a few projects where impacts were perceived by certain TAB members like, oh my gosh, shouldn't we be talking about this? We're to advise the town on transportation matters. This developer is gonna do A, B, and C, and we should weigh in. So I don't know that there's a right or wrong. TAB can decide if they want to engage in that arena or not. I guess we could ask the town board if there's an expectation for the town, you know, from the board to get any type of feedback from TAB on these matters. But you think about the process, the land use applications, there's different flavors. Some are administrative, some go to the planning commission, some go to the planning commission and the town board. And so it opens up a bigger conversation, which of those application types would TAB want to be engaged in, or does the town board want TAB to be engaged in? Up to this point, the direction or the conclusion, it hasn't even been directed, it's just been, the mode of operation has been, TAB does not provide input on land use applications, traffic issues associated with land use applications. The Spring Hill Suites is a candidate.
Yeah.
Because
Around
the intersection improvements there.
Right.
Jimmy John's came in, they put a traffic signal in, and I
We did
think,
talk about that one.
I think at the engineering level, those construction plans came through, and we informed TAB that this developer is obligated to construct a traffic signal, so there's an impact, but TAB was never asked to provide any comments on that, other than just the mechanics of the construction plans,
Okay,
yeah.
So,
Has it been to the planning commission, the project?
Which,
No.
Jimmy John's is built and approved.
No, I meant.
Oh, Spring Hill Suites.
Alcorn.
Elk
No,
Lodge,
no,
those
it's
two.
not to that point yet.
So, no, my personal feeling is planning commission takes the lead on reviewing current planning projects. If they would like input from TAB or advice, or the town board wants advice, I think we could consider it then. That's my
I feel a
take.
little differently about that. I think that, I mean, so for instance, the proposed housing out at Fish Hatchery, where they're talking about putting in, I don't know, 100-ish units, that would be, to my understanding, housing potentially for families and people who are gonna be working in town, and there would be it's a long way out of road that doesn't have any transit available for most of the year. And so it would be obliging everybody who lived there to be driving their vehicles back and forth to town several times a day. And so I think there is a real transportation dimension to these development plans that is worthy of at least considering.
But would our opinion play into that before it was ever approved? Or in my mind, like if whatever stage of approval that fish hatchery is, got approved, now we have a traffic, not situation, but that sounds dramatic, that maybe then is when we start brainstorming when the project's still extremely early. I don't feel like we would have any kind of insight into whether or not the project should get approved based on what the traffic flow would increase or not. We would be more kind of an after the fact thought, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, I loved your comment, because you're raising a really
That's exactly the
fundamental
question.
question here.
It is.
What if, let me back up, a property owner, developer, applicant is given direction on how to move through the town process by the content in the development code. It lays out the rules and requirements and the shalls and shall nots. I can imagine a scenario that TAB is weighing in on one of these applications, and TAB may have an opinion that's contrary to the development code. What's the planning commission supposed to do with that? What's the town board supposed to do with that? We say, we have a development code that establishes processes to get approval. And are we gonna open the door to new comments and perspectives and requirements based on an advisory board? And I just ask it somewhat rhetorically. Now, the land use code, development code, is getting updated in the next year. And if there is a community desire for TAB to have a voice in land use applications, there's a golden opportunity to incorporate that into the new development code.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And this has been brought up before.
So, yeah, where is the role of relying on staff to cover those issues versus giving opportunity for an advisory board to also weigh in on versus the community at large? Now, in the land use arena, there's nothing in this that prevents any TAB member or all the TAB members coming together and coming to a planning commission meeting or coming to a town board meeting saying, we have concern, we're citizens, we're concerned, we're speaking as citizens, maybe or maybe not as the collective voice of TAB.
I've been approached by this,
But
about this.
it's not as if this group has no voice, you do, but there is no adopted process that creates an expectation for comments from TAB on land use applications. But it could change if there's a desire to change, again, because we're updating the development code.
I think there's two different kinds of participation we could have. And one of them would be, this is a letter that says, this application to do the whole thing should be turned down because the road's not fit for it. Another thing that we could do would be advise that process as to, if you are gonna do it, here's our opinion about traffic or road connections.
Yeah,
Whether
no.
there should be a roundabout or a traffic light or something, but the turn off development because you haven't figured out the road part is a different thing than us saying, when you get ready to do the road part.
Well, now, consider,
Maybe we should have a say about that.
So we're running out of time, so I just
Yeah,
put a little, I'm wondering if we could table this and come back to it, cause I think this is possibly a good conversation.
yeah, save that
I don't
for a
wanna-
future
yeah.
agenda item, yeah.
And then run off the tracks too much. But I think it's really important, you know, so, and, yeah, and also the development code, and, trustee Eigel had brought up before at another meeting, is like maybe we should be thinking about those when they are, or looking at revising the development code, how does that align with traffic and transportation? And, making sure that we have some sort of oversight of it as well.
Well, as you're thinking about it, consider that TAB is advisory to the town board and to public works staff. And so we draw input from TAB in the context of, when there's gonna be a construction project on a road that's gonna affect transportation, whether it's land use initiated or whether it's town initiated, we involve TAB in the review and comment of those construction plans. But commenting on the details of the design is different than commenting on the philosophy of whether or not we're gonna put in new intersection control at an intersection, or whether the town should or should not approve a land use application that triggers those types of things.
How would that end up being on our agenda in a, not ideal world, we're not making decisions, but like, would town staff request for us to help brainstorm with that? It kind of, what it reminds me of is when we had the overhead projectors and we were trying to figure out how the parking could be with the buses for the visitor center. It just kind of felt like a big brainstorming session. Is that kind of what we're discussing this becoming?
Useful.
It'd be more time, but
Absent any new action from TAB, what staff would continue to do is, when these land use applications are approved, and when there are conditions of approval on the land use application to make transportation related improvements, there will be a set of construction drawings. We, at staff, would bring those through for comment on the details. So there's that opportunity, and that's been our mode of operation. But if TAB wants an earlier entry point to speak to a higher level philosophically on the pros and cons of even approving the land use that triggers the transportation obligations, that's the new separate conversation. So you could have it, or you could rely on the existing system where you can come in as citizens and comment that way. I guess the question is, does this board wanna have a new voice at an earlier stage of land use applications?
I do not.
I do not
I
either.
don't either.
And besides that, when this affects like 36 and there's talk of the roundabout and things like that, that's already been discussed in planning sessions for town board meetings for that exact intersection, and it's already in our documentation of possibility projects for the future. So
Good point,
if
you think about that
it's already on our radar,
multimodal transportation plan, the list of 30 and 20 and 15 different projects, odds are pretty high that
that it's on. the
anything triggered by land use is gonna be in that list.
list. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, everything in this is already in that list.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
some point, something's gonna trigger it someday.
And this is a letter asking us to oppose the land use.
Or I think it's, yeah, or, yeah,
To weigh in.
just
and-
weigh in, I think it's more
Yeah.
weigh in.
Yeah.
I think it's just
And
being
so you-
aware that it's
So
happening.
you could respond, under current protocol and expectations and process, TAB does not have a voice in land use applications.
That's good. I like that.
It would be a good,
Or you could add to that, that the transportation projects caused by this land use decision will eventually.
Yeah, if there are improvements into the roadway network,
Or need-
TAB will be looking at that content in that context.
Yes.
Yes, we would.
So if this causes transportation projects, we'll hear about them when those projects.
Yeah, TAB would weigh in at that point in time and offer opinions and comments on the details of the design.
Okay, yeah, design, yeah, okay.
And presumably the details of the design would be, needed to be hashed out before the full permits go forward.
that would be with
Yes.
town staff and probably with the planning commission.
Yeah.
Yeah, the land use application will go through its approval process. There will be components of the design that planning commission will see and the town board will see. And generally, there will be a condition that says you can't get your building permits to start the work until
Until
your
the rest
public
is-
infrastructure is designed and generally
approved.
built.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Do
And there's
wildlife
nuances
studies
in
and
that.
wetland studies and, I know it's on top of the ridge, but
Traffic
there's a whole list of
studies,
things that
yeah.
they've gotta do before it can get approved.
So I think I'm hearing TAB just answered their own question. They don't wanna put this on a future agenda.
But the design part, yeah.
But I'm interested,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad he wrote
Make
it.
When
sure
it
there's
comes to us
sidewalks
as a
and-
transportation question,
At the construction,
Yeah.
or at the design phase of the specific improvements, which is much later, has nothing to do with, the ship has sailed, the horse is out of the barn at that
Right.
point. The land use is already approved.
And we can, if you have an opinion, go to do it personally
Uh-huh.
at the higher level. Just- okay.
Yeah, and if anyone or all are sympathetic to these perspectives, come to the public meetings and share them.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Do you think that would be beneficial in some other conversations about public comment coming to TAB? Does public comment, an individual voice, does it get lost, do you think, or diluted, coming to an advisory board and then being transferred to a decision-making authority? Do you think that there's a benefit in saying, we hear you, this is what we think? Also, share that with the town board, the planning commission.
That is,
Looking at how effective public input is, my sense of this board is an intentional group of members of the community who represent as individuals, represent different parts of the community. But to take a public input here and then distill it up in the decision-making process, does it get lost?
I think it gets diluted. I think it's more effective for the concerned party to speak
Harry-
directly to the decision board.
Harry Kent should
Decision-making
appear,
board.
standing here, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that it will
Which I
have
think
more
he's
impact.
involved
I
in.
agree with you.
And if our objective is and I think the whole point of TAB is public input, then it may be worth any public input that comes in, encouraging that kind of a move. Just don't wanna lose it.
Alright. So, ending public comment, then moving on quickly. We have trustee liaison update and then approved minutes right after that, and we'll head into the multimodal projects.
I will make my update really quick, although it could be really long, I'm gonna keep it quick. There's a board meeting last week on Tuesday, and I made some statements about the process of that. And it was about paid parking, and it was absent a letter from TAB, but it was also absent any other public input. And in conversations I've had over the last several weeks or months about process, this was a good opportunity to highlight opportunities for improving information the board has to make decisions. So unfortunately, it created some consternation and an opportunity for some of the information that I shared to be, I think the meaning changed, and so I have made a very intentional effort to clarify those facts in my position. And I'm available to any of you to look you in the eyes and tell you where I'm at on things. I'm certainly not making underhanded statements to be dramatic, but I am trying to stimulate conversation in issues that we talk about. So, that being said, I believe in the benefits of TAB to our community, to the town board, as an advisory board. I believe in a lot of the work that TAB does. When I say a lot of the work, you always leave yourself a little room for maybe that one issue or the other, but I have a responsibility to work as the liaison, to communicate between the board and the board. And I have a responsibility as a trustee to represent the community. So those are two different conversations that I will have when I'm serving in this role. So Trill, I've met with Bell, I've met with the mayor, we've talked about, some of the issues that have come up, and we're having a conversation about it. I hope that I think it's productive. In meeting with Director Mahonen, he indicated that with his staff, they've talked about the process, the presentation. So I get the sense in talking to staff that there may be some benefits to animated, engaged conversation at every level of town government. So I see positive potential outcome in all of this and opportunities. And I avail myself to you if there's any questions or comments about where I'm at or statements that I've made.
I heard that you were interested in having, or questioning whether TAB should continue to exist. That's what I heard,
So that was factually incorrect.
but that's what I heard
Where did you hear that?
at
or
the
read
town
that?
board meeting.
And those were my words that said we should discontinue TAB.
That- And, yeah, that was pretty close to what I heard, Mark. I'm just being honest about what I heard.
I appreciate your honesty and looking at me and telling me that, because in my rewatching it or feedback I've heard from other people, the comparison that I made to other boards that have been sunset,
Yeah,
that was a statement that I made in an email to clarify it following the meeting. Other boards have been sunset after their objectives
sure,
were met.
no,
Have you heard me comment about TAB having good conversation in previous months? Putting out a good product and being a valuable part of the process? Because those are comments that I've also made at meetings previously.
okay.
So I have been supportive of TAB as
Okay,
well.
well, I guess that's my main question, Mark,
Sure.
is we serve at the pleasure of the town board and
Sure.
recognize that, and if the town board doesn't see value for TAB and decides, no, this board needs to sunset, that's the town board's prerogative.
Sure.
If the town board does want TAB to continue and to provide input as an advisory board, I guess I wanted to make sure that you, as our liaison, you truly see that there is a benefit for TAB and that you would like to see it, continue on. If you don't, then maybe we need to have another liaison. I'll just say that.
Sure. And I think that's fair. And I think that that's a town board decision or a mayor's decision. And I think that's a really if that's a legitimate concern, that should be a conversation you have with the mayor or the board. I think.
I just wanted to know where your heart
Yeah,
is.
I'm telling you. I mean, I come to these meetings since the first meeting I came, my first TAB meeting was, have you thought about this, TAB? And then I was put on TAB as a member because I had a little bit different opinion. And I participated and I attended, and then here I am,
Yeah.
appointed by the mayor to participate. So I believe that TAB has something valuable to contribute to the conversation. I also agree with our former trustee Mar19 when he made the observation that TAB's purpose and objective has evolved. And it seems like TAB is just, the product is writing letters to support town projects. And at the end of his time with TAB, the conversation that he had with this board was, you have to talk about whether you need to meet or not.
Yes,
And so that was part of the conversation as he was going out as the liaison. And it might be a communication style, might be that I speak strongly, but my heart is in being a good communicator and learning how to do that better if it's not good. So if that wasn't clearly communicated, I am invested in this group because I think that the impacts of transportation on our community are substantial. And the input from the public is critical. And so I think that there are opportunities for this board to improve on the product that the group puts out, on the focus of what the town board asks or what the town board needs. But if we take a constituent letter and spend 20 minutes on it and then create a new agenda item and then have a conversation and do we want to take a position on that letter, I think that's a little bit of a creep for a board that's an advisory board that should be tasked with projects to grow. It's an important issue. Is it an issue for this board? How do we introduce new items? I think those are all good topics for conversation. But I hope that by not just saying yes or no, I am thoughtful about this group and the process.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, it was just a bit startling to hear your comments at the town board. I don't know whether the others felt the same way or not, but I just wanted to make sure where you were coming from.
I think that my strong sentiment, Larry, came from, in the past, and I don't want to repeat everything, so maybe I won't even dig into it, because we're already behind time-wise. I'm happy to talk to you about it more if you want, and give you my perspective.
I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your
I'm
comment.
bought in, and I think that some conversations are uncomfortable, but I'm willing to stand behind everything that I've said.
Thank you.
The part that bothered me was in watching your recording and the multiple times I've seen your letter on Facebook afterwards, was that as our liaison, I feel you have a special duty to be especially truthful about what does and doesn't happen at TAP, since we're not invited to describe it at every trustee meeting. And what I heard was a description to the other trustees that since we had not written a letter in favor of continuing the same parking thing that had been there for a couple years, for which I had never heard anybody complain, that therefore we must be against it and want it to stop. And that seemed an unfair description of all the TAB meetings I've been to. And then on Facebook, this is spreading around with one group or another saying, oh, many of us have complained about it. We want it to stop, we've been, and that hadn't come through TAB. So I felt like I was ambushed or blindsided by, apparently we've been getting one or two resident complaints about transportation every meeting. And usually, you know, I can't park where I want to or something. But we didn't get this stack of letters in the parking program. There was one resident sent that to the trustees at the very last meeting, minute before that meeting. And when you, the liaison from this group, were speaking about it, it was easy to see something maybe you didn't mean to say, but it sounded like you were saying, since we had not said we were in favor of the same rates and the same parking spots, we were against it.
But
And
that-
then we had heard from a lot of people who were against it.
But that is the problem that I have, because as this being one of the topics that there's two topics that made me join TAB, and this is one of them. I was here for the fall when Dana presented the numbers and did all of that thing, and we were very supportive, and it was an incredible presentation. But since I have been here, we have never been given the opportunity to even discuss this. And so since just a year ago, and I think the last letter that I saw was 2 years ago, just since a year ago, we have a 50% new TAB board. And I don't feel like we have ever been given the opportunity to speak up on whether we support going forward with paid parking with the loop being complete or not. I didn't have any problem with anything that Mark had said in the board meeting. I had some shock at some other things that I heard, sorry Dana, Dana's the best ever. But when Dana was asked why it wasn't presented to us or put it on the thing, his quote was, "I just didn't do it this time, and I will ask them for these in future years." And so when you have a 50% at least new transportation advisory board that hasn't even been given the opportunity to speak on the topic, I was stunned to see that I watched the board meeting live because I always kind of keep track of what's going on that might interest me. And so I watched that live and I was in shock. Some of the trustee Hazelton's quotes were, I think if TAB wanted to get a letter of support or dissent, that's their prerogative, it's their choice as an advisory board. It's not a requirement in my opinion. And although I respect what she's saying, we were never given that opportunity. Trustee Youngland said, I have some reservation about the letter, this letter weighing so much on the decision moving forward tonight. You've been talking to TAB throughout, working in coming years, planned for some time. I think we have heard something to the effect that if they weren't for this before tonight, and again, we were never given the opportunity to ever speak up. And then Trustee Landcamer said, I actually could go either way, wait for it or not. I don't think TAB is the decision making. The letter, which we would be taking into consideration, but it's not their decision, they're an advisory board. And so why wouldn't he want to wait to another board meeting to let us weigh in on that before they voted? So I'm in shock that the town board voted on it without us even ever discussing it and letting us have that input. That's why it is on Facebook. Another problem that I have personally, and I totally understand where everybody's coming from, but we have an email that Belle had written. It feels weird talking about you guys when you're right here. We have an email that Belle had written to Trustee Eigel as the co-chair. She actually signed it as the co-chair, or as the chair of the Transportation Advisory Board. And the language in it is so divisive and so personal and so offensive that to have this email go out and to be a representative of us and of me and say things like you did, whether you're accusing him of not remembering or that he didn't attend or that his assumptions were dark. You accused Trustee Eigel of personal viewpoints. He's an elected official, and I know that we're a voluntary citizen board, but I think this was in poor taste, and I am very offended that it was signed as the chair of the advisory board. So I would like to speak that out. I can go on. You accused him of thinking TAB is not engaged, that we have poor performance, assumptions were made about what he thinks that were nothing compared to what I saw him say live at that meeting. So it just really rubbed me the wrong way, and I thought it was extremely inappropriate.
So I'd like to respond to that, and since brought this up. I have I'm a citizen.
Correct.
I'm
I
also a
agree.
member, I'm also a chair, and I have every right to make any kind of comment. I did not say I'm speaking on behalf of TAB.
True.
What I spoke is my opinion and my experience. So,
But it is
just clear
also
about
your
that.
signature on.
And my signature to saying who I am. Yeah. I think that's really important.
Because it's a transportation
Because
topic.
because
and
it
it is a
is,
topic that we would
because
discuss
I am,
in here, but have
because
not.
I am looking at things, I've been engaged for years. I've watched the inception, the idea, when Chair Campbell met and came with the idea of having a public, or a paid parking program. And TAB initiated and developed it along with Public Works. And I've watched the evolution. I've been engaged all the way through as a citizen and happen to be a member of TAB. So I feel I have every right, just like every single one of you have a right to submit a letter. I was deeply offended by the town board meeting. I could not believe that Liaison Eigel took the liberty to be quite generous with his interpretation or assumption that somehow TAB was actually conspiring and felt we were all against paid parking program. When, and my comment in the letter was, I was trying to figure out, where did he come up with this idea that we would be against it when our conversations, we have been having conversations about paid parking. You had been gone too. And I was thinking about, like, why, where are they coming from? Where is Mark coming from? And so that's why I said, oh, maybe it's because you weren't there. And so I was giving him the benefit of the doubt that perhaps, if he's gonna come up with this big statement to the public and be our liaison, which means that role, he has to give fact-based, evidence-based information to the town board. There's no fact around us ever in a conversation that anyone said, other than Carissa, had said they wanted to eliminate paid parking completely. And we all had discussion about the fact that 2025 would probably be really helpful for our community to just take a big breath and just let everything settle, see what's going on with the loop, give everyone, a breather around finishing up the Cleve project, and just let things settle. And so we didn't pursue phase 4 in the transportation plan, the parking management plan, and which means expansion, means higher fees possibly, means identifying and having parking structures developed, built. And so we all, we agreed. There was conversation about it. No, we did not take a final vote, and we did not send a letter. And that I do regret. I feel like we all missed that opportunity. I think there's a big learning around the impact of the letter. Like, it does clarify, so there's no room for someone like a liaison to create a whole narrative that really is not fact-based and report to the town board that we somehow were against paid parking for 2025 in the program. So I think it just proves the case of making sure that we do have that direct conversation, so there is no confusion. And I know that Manager Dana Klein it was just straight up about it, that we have been very busy. We've been deep dive in the management of the master plan for this transportation plan for 2045. And, truthfully, it was off my radar as well, so, so I feel I have no regret about sending any kind of communication. And I was responding to a letter he sent to me. And I felt like he was preying on me, and I don't appreciate that.
But I don't see how we can say that we approve, that we support it or don't support it, when I don't feel like we've had the opportunity. There are at least 2 of us that I know of that are extremely against it. And so how can we decide if we have the opinion for or against? It really felt like we have these new board members on TAB that have strong differing opinions, so we're not going to talk about it and we're just going to go to the board. I'm not accusing Davey of that, but it hasn't been on our schedule. I truly feel like it should have come up. We should have been discussing it. I have a lot of feedback. I probably see 400 tourists every day in the summer. I get a lot of conversations. I send them to the parking garage. These are my day-to-day activities. And so I think my input is valuable, and
I agree.
I understand there's two of us coming in here extremely against it, I'm talking about Carissa, she
Right.
made a public comment today, I don't feel like I'm out of line saying that with her. But to not even have the opportunity to share our viewpoints to see if anybody else would at least be responsive of it, I think was very upsetting.
If I can offer a
Yes,
couple
please.
comments here. One, what I hear from Misty is, you didn't say this, I'm reading between the lines.
I'll
but
correct you if you're wrong, yeah.
What I think I'm hearing is a suggestion that if any communication is gonna be signed by a
A title.
TAB member or the chair of TAB, that communication should be vetted through the entire TAB.
With the title, if, you
Yeah,
know,
if
if
the
it
title's
was in
gonna
the
be-
body
yeah.
and it was like, you know, if I was writing an email about paid parking and I would say, just, you know, I've been aware, you know, I've been part of this tab board and in these conversations, but I'm writing as myself.
Right.
And when we had our orientation, that you made it very clear, Greg, that was the way to handle things. You never, cause you know that I get heated about some of these things, and I felt like you were talking right to me when you told me in orientation, you never, it wasn't just to me, but I got it.
You took it.
I wasn't offended, I was
Good.
entertained. But you never speak on behalf or represent yourself as the TAB board when you are relaying your personal opinions. And I mean, I took that to heart. I'm always very careful when I'm talking and in debates and even on the jibber jabber. I really thought that was important, and it's important how it's portrayed. This is signed by a title. And so I personally, being on this board, was extremely bothered.
I so appreciate, one, that you took the comments to heart
I
and
do.
you own that conviction.
Yeah.
I think it's still important. I think it's dangerous when any one TAB member would go write a letter to the editor or anything on social media and sign it as a member of TAB. While it's factually true that you're a member of TAB, I just have some personal discomfort with somebody being a self-appointed
Feels
spokesperson
like
for
you're buying
TAB.
influence.
And I think it's better, if anything is gonna be signed with a reference to TAB as a member or the chair, whatever, that I think it's good business
Yeah, I agree.
to talk it over, if there's not unanimity on the,
And I would
issue.
apply that to our liaison as well. If you speak for us at a trustees meeting, you should say, this is me, this is not something I discussed with anyone on TAB. And what I saw in the recording of the meeting was a very easy to imply, this is what I remember from TAB meetings, this is what TAB thinks. And the other trustees may have got the idea that we were aware of these things you were talking about. And, you know, that was what I felt I was kind of stabbed in the back. You were talking about the consensus as if we had had a discussion.
Yeah. Good point, if I may continue, I had 2 points to make, that was the first one, and the second one, the root issue here is the omission of the letter. Misty made a great point, there was no opportunity. When this came up, it was one of those, oh my gosh moments, I feel like I just got caught with my pants down. What are we gonna do now? Dana and I talked about, how are we gonna handle this, and we did what we did. After I more fully observed the extent of response to the omission of that letter, you all got an email from me, here's the letter from 2023.
Right.
I think the board may appreciate, even it's after the fact, I think the board would appreciate hearing from the current TAB and all the views that are represented on this topic, and maybe write a comment letter regarding the continuation of paid parking in 2025. Trustee Brown suggested that the board not take action until that letter had come.
Yeah.
Frank Lancaster responded,
That's
that the board
fantastic.
ultimately decided to move forward. Personally, I still see value in giving everyone on TAB a voice, distill that into a letter, and give it, if you wanna do that, give it to me, I will distribute it to the town board as part of our Public Works weekly update. Not understanding it may not change the outcome in any way, but that's not so much the mission. The mission is to do what we should have done. We really should have, as a group, talked through that. And I confess, I watched and, I participated, I watched from afar in some meetings. There was so much focus on these two big master planning documents, this fell off the radar. I have to own that.
I do
Tab
too.
has
I
owned
already
it.
did that.
Yeah.
I am glad that you
Yeah.
mentioned the letter, because the official letter that was sent out that you sent us so we could have it to
Yeah.
read through was signed the exact same way as that email was, as an official letter and document representing TAB.
And I think that
exactly-
reinforces your point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, so,
Yeah.
I'm done, sorry, John.
Could I address-
I'm clueless. Where did this appear?
This,
What's that?
this letter came, this is the official 2023 letter.
No,
that Greg
the
sent it to
one
us.
that you were referencing.
The email was on the public record for the town board.
It's a public portal
It's like an
communication,
email
Larry, it was
portal.
not email
That's why I said it's weird
communication.
talking
Approached
about,
me, he emailed me a letter and he copied in, Dana and the town administrator. And he was, you know, making assumptions, and
Okay,
I
so you-
responded.
I got really upset here,
Okay.
and I
And he
started
signed his
tracking
name.
the
So you
public
resp-
emails.
I
you
responded.
responded, so it's in the public record
Right.
portal
And it
for
has
the town.
hundred and thirty-seven
Okay.
views
And I
as
spoke,
of
I
a
stayed.
few days
Okay,
ago.
okay,
Statements.
I hadn't read it, or wasn't, it's
sorry.
like, where
I
is this
wasn't aware
coming?
that that existed, that we should, people who aren't copied on emails should be reading all the emails back and forth.
You probably don't have to, but
And it's,
that's
yeah,
just
I felt I was
That's
directly
just me.
responding to a liaison who I felt was really misrepresenting TAB.
I get
And
it,
took
okay.
his position and really went with it. I know there've been other, meetings, town board meetings, where our liaisons with, trustee Bangs, trustee Marchink, where, the town board had a question and the liaison was able to give, an accurate view of what TAB's conversations had been. And so they could be informed accurately about a subject. So, and I didn't see that with our liaison. What I heard was he injected his own personal story, narrative, and that was very troubling to me. And I was very concerned for our group. I felt like our integrity of TAB was in question, because now there's this kind of conspiracy that somehow,
I think this
you
did
know,
that more than.
I just felt it was really inappropriate. And so I personally was, knowing the amount of work that we have done and the support letters from 2023, 24, and our discussions at TAB that we have been having, I thought for sure he could answer appropriately and maybe add if he needed to, and I disagree, you know, this, you know, and also, this is my point of view about paid parking or something, you know, separate himself from what a liaison was reporting on our behalf. And I felt like he was reporting something very inaccurate, so.
I appreciate that he seems to try to use stall tactics to push this back, because we don't have a current opinion on whether we are pro paid parking or anti paid parking. And so if he was in a position where he wasn't saying, well, we would have to make assumptions because we don't have this letter, then his other option would be to be silent. And I don't think that that is appropriate either. So I appreciate the stirring of the conversation that took place at that town board meeting. And we haven't talked about this, I assume that's what his intention is. And so I appreciated that. I appreciated that he didn't refer to a letter from 2 years ago with at least half, if not more. I only looked from last year, so it might even be more than 50%. I'm trying to sit here and figure out who's not here and how long they've been on the board in my head. So I appreciate that he didn't commit one way or the other, and I appreciate that he wasn't silent.
You're okay that he created a narrative?
I have it all typed out what they all said, so I could
But
sit
you're
here and
okay
read
with
it.
what
I don't think there was a narrative.
he said that his assumption was that we were then therefore
Opposed.
opposing paid parking, and that for some reason we're withholding it. So there was some sort of conspiracy going on. And, I just don't think that's accurate nor fair to the amount of work and attention that even the past few months, we have talked about paid parking. So, we've gone over some data that was presented, we've gone through the numbers. But I agree with you that we did not take a vote on it, we did not send a letter, and that matters. And so that part I agree with, and coming in here, I wanted to make, and it's in the agenda, like, I would advocate for us sending in something to communicate, so that you are heard, and I value the diversity. I think that is like so core, and almost every letter we send in as a recommendation, I always, on tab, always include dissent and their arguments and why, as well as the support and why, and this is our final vote, 2 to 5, 2 or 3 to 8, I don't know, whatever, and it's really important, and I think everyone's input has always been very valuable, and we listen to it, so just like we are now, so.
Let's put this on the agenda for future meeting, and let's have a robust discussion about paid parking, either for 2025, well, at this point, it would be
They've
for
already voted.
2025.
It's all right.
And it'll be after the fact, but at least we capture everybody's thinking on the program.
Do you think we should wait until other members are here, or should we, because we've
Well,
got a full agenda.
that, you can't predict, who's I put it on the agenda, and people who are here can weigh in.
I would just like to say, I don't feel any urgency in getting a letter to the town about how we
No.
feel about paid parking.
Right.
It's already done,
Yeah.
2025
I
agree.
is a done deal. And I think it's really important to let the temperature come down a little bit on this whole discussion. Because I don't think we can, at this point, have a productive discussion with everybody so upset. And I think it's, all around the table. And I would like to see a really, really thoughtful discussion about the whole issue of paid parking and how it fits into our larger vision for how downtown functions for ourselves and our visitors. And that's not something to rush, and I'd like to see a real considered, like, plenty of time to discuss it, and maybe even a moderated discussion. So, okay, that's my point.
May I wrap up my report?
Yes.
Sorry.
So 30 minutes in, I have to acknowledge your sage words that just rolled out of your mouth, the perspective that you shared in settling some of the temperature of this conversation, I appreciate. And I appreciate your perspective on it, the need for us to have a good, balanced, productive conversation. And I'm not gonna add a whole lot more to this conversation. I disagree with some of the things that I'm hearing about my character in the last 30 minutes I spent hearing a conversation where he did this and he did that and he's sitting right here, and I can address those if I could have gotten just a word in edgewise. But based on what I heard in the last 30 minutes, it sounds like I got in front of this community and said, well, TAB is terrible, they're doing terrible work, and they're not producing anything good, and I don't agree with that at all. And that has got to be very clear for each of you and this community that TAB has a valuable place. My strong comments that I hear mischaracterized here, because I've read the transcript twice and I've watched the video, I asked a rhetorical question, in the absence of a letter, does that mean TAB doesn't support this? Just like in the past when TAB provides a letter of support, well, it's clear. So anyone that understands how the membership of this group has changed may be able to say, maybe it has changed, maybe it hasn't. The question was, if there's not a letter, is it not support? I never asserted that TAB should be ended, and I didn't assert that there was no support from TAB. So I would take exception to that, and I want that to be really clear on the record, because my objective is to stimulate 30-minute conversations that will result in processes being improved and conversations being richer and facts being fuller. And I think we have to have that in this community to make good decisions. So I'm not saying that you fell for a difficult conversation, but in a little bit of a way we did, and I think the outcome in the future will be positive. So I appreciate the opportunity to give that report.
Any other, did you wanna say anything?
I have mine in my report for the
Okay, great. Alright. Alright, so moving on, approving the February 19th minutes. Any corrections submitted?
None submitted.
And move to approve the February 19th. I move to,
Perfect, a second.
any second? Okay, any comments? Okay, voting?
Yes.
Who's?
Larry's voting yes.
Okay, we'll approve, yeah, because there was enough of a quorum. Okay, so the February 19th minutes, have been approved. So now we're gonna go into the final draft discussion on multimodal transportation plan. Most, importantly, or specifically, the transit had a lot of more information on that. And really appreciate seeing the comment one
Sure.
too, it was really helpful. So,
So on those, I guess, don't worry about the typos and things like that. My team went through and did a lot of work on that. So it was more content based that I was concerned with on these documents with you all. Just, and then what we would like to do, and I didn't bring my calendar, Greg, for the dates, but my plan is to take these to the town board if possible on April 22nd. So we have one more tab meeting between now and then. It would be great if you could provide a comment letter. It doesn't have to be an approval letter, just a comment letter about your comments or the tab's comments on these two documents. Which may be something to work out between now and that meeting, and then hopefully we could include that as part of our packet that goes to the town board on the 22nd for these two items. If we delay past that time, it will which, you know, if you're not ready, that's fine too. Then it would probably be June that we would take those, because I'm gonna be gone some of the May meetings, for the May meetings, so I won't be able to prepare the packets, which require 3 weeks in advance to get to to get all into the system.
okay. Do you think, so you're asking for comment, maybe about the process. Would you, does TAB want to have a vote on them as well after our robust conversation about paid parking? I'm wondering if, in April, we do, we unanimously present this along with Public Works.
Yeah, that's another
Is
option that
that-
we had talked about, obviously.
Yeah, when I look out into the future and look into my pretend crystal ball, this group has not formulated a position paper yet. I don't know how long that's gonna take and what that process is gonna look like. My hope was that if this group is generally content, is feeling ready to take a position and offer comments on these two documents, the MTP and the TDP, that sentiment could be shared by all today. Val could take notes. She could start a draft of a written comment summary. I'm not gonna call it letters of support, I'm gonna wean myself off of that, that may not be. But if it's not supportive, our team's gotta look at it in the eye with each other and say, is this really ready to go to the town board? Anyway, I'm gonna call it a TAB comment letter. If Bill could, if you're at a point of distilling your positions into bullet points that Bill could capture, and she could craft a comment response and bring it to the April, or probably distribute it before the April meeting. So everyone can look at it and say, oh, I like this, we missed this point, totally disagree with that. Come to the April meeting with the intent of finalizing the content of the TAB position on these two documents. Then we would take that, I'll need to have some wordsmithing done, some clarification right after the meeting, because that's on a Wednesday. And I would like to, if I get the final product on the Wednesday, I can get it into the town board packet. That's not the only option, that's the preferred option. Second option would be to get the letter whenever I get it, and we just give it to the clerk's office and they distribute it, independent of the packet at a later date. Or the third option would be, we don't get anything in writing and Tab comes and talks about it through your chair, probably at the town board meeting. It's not a very attractive option to me, but it is an option. Of course, then fourthly, if we can't get there under this timeline, we move all this, into the May meeting, the June
The
meeting.
June meeting.
Yeah.
So the simple ask is that we would each send to Val a short bullet point list of what we like and don't like about it?
Well, you could, I was hoping that,
Can we talk
That-
about it? Cause like,
I think we need to
Yeah,
talk
I'm
about
very
it.
curious, like, at what Larry
Discussion.
thinks and stuff like that here.
Yeah, I was hoping that we've discussed this sufficiently. The consultant has responded appropriately or inappropriately. And if we are at a point of general satisfaction with the document, that you could state your position in support or in opposition to the current state of the document verbally, and Bill would take notes.
I like that.
And then she will
Yeah.
distill that into a draft
Then we just
comment letter.
approve it next month.
And then we'll go through and fine tune
Yeah.
it, tweak
Okay.
it
Yeah.
the following meeting.
I just had a brainstorm. The US Supreme Court has a majority and a minority position when they produce their rulings. And I think for TAB, it would be good to have a majority and a minority position on
That's a
not
great
just this, but anything that goes.
Probably going
If
forward,
they're
I
strongly
think there's,
opinion, yeah.
We usually never, I never identify a specific who voted what way.
that's
Cause
wisdom.
that's never personal.
Although they are
But-
recorded now.
They, but I think it kind of captures what you're saying is like,
Yeah.
what is the position rather than personalizing it.
And I'm prepared to comment on both documents whenever we're ready.
May I just ask simply, you said like small corrections and things, is that beneficial if I found something to just email it to you? It doesn't really have to
Sure.
get brought up here, it's not anything huge.
Yeah, or-
Some of the pages are out of order of what was sent out from Lonnie, the most recent one. And so it was just kind of strange, so I can send that to you,
Yeah.
email that's not part of this.
Perfect,
It's a
yeah.
couple like more of those figured people things, they got most of them fixed, but
Yeah, I noticed,
I got myself confused in a couple.
we noticed a lot of
Okay,
those where the
okay,
words
good.
go together and things,
So you
yeah.
probably will already even know about them.
Yeah, if you
I
have
took
it written down.
screenshots as I was reading them and circled them on here too. Yeah,
See
I
if
could
they're in
compare
there.
them.
Yeah, compare,
Okay.
they're probably in there,
Other than that, I didn't have any issues with the document itself, so
great,
I feel like
sorry.
Yeah, the consultant, I think, was responsive to comments that were made and explained why, or actually made the changes or explained why they were made. I just had two thoughts. One is that I thought that the transit portion that's in the multimodal was going to be this redundant. I
Okay,
thought that was gonna be
removed, I will bring that up again because I noticed that as well.
removed.
We had
'cause-
talked about having 2 or 3 pages at the front just to reference the one document versus
Right.
the other, and I think they still have it at 10, so I don't know if that's something they can't distill or where they're at.
Yeah, I think it could just be referenced in the, instead of being redundant.
Okay,
And then the other question is a more substantial one. For Dana and for you, Greg, I just wanted to make sure that the priorities, the list of priorities that were pretty much for the multimodal transportation plan were pretty much generated through the weighting factors. I just wanted to have a reality check that from your perspective, these are, in terms of applying for funding, for things that staff is gonna be working on, that they're in an order that you agree with. Just as thinking about them, this is where we're gonna put our money, this is where we're gonna invest our time, these are the top priorities for this community, that you're comfortable with those. And if you answer yes, I'm happy with that. Cause I brought up at the last meeting, I thought a couple other projects should have perhaps received a higher weighting. That was a lead balloon, it didn't go anywhere, so we're still with the weighting that, we developed, and that's how the project shook out. I just wanna make sure you're comfortable with it.
And I think we talked about that very briefly last time, that, you know, the priorities may change within even 5 years or less. And that some of these projects that we identified were not the number one on this list, that we advanced to the upper front range based on that needs analysis. So, and I think we talked about, you know, the idea was just make sure they're in the plan. If they're not number one, and they may receive a higher priority due to some other reason down the road, but as long as they're in the plan.
You can move them, okay.
Yeah,
It's flexible.
it's flexible, and it's flexible on our upper front range TPR plan, I think, too. Even the ones we listed as number 1 and 2 priority, those can change, can't they, Greg?
They can. I left the last meeting with a different understanding. I had an expectation that you and Jeff were gonna take that back to the consultant and move that particular recommendation that Larry mentioned and move it up in the priority ranking as requested. And then the weighting summary, the narrative in the document would explain that the priority ranking was based on weighting and input from the Transportation Advisory Board.
And I did not check the MTP for updates on those plans.
Well,
Because I was focused on the T.
just to be fair, to all of the conversation that we've had so far in this meeting, it should not come from one tab member. I think it
agree.
should be a consensus that yes, this project is important enough that it needs to, you know, move up in the ranking. So, I did not expect that just based on my input that things would be rearranged. My only concern is if we picked a project that there's funding available, and we find there's a project that's like in the middle tier, and we really like to see funding for this. How do we justify it when it's in the middle tier and higher ranked projects? Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was on board with the way things were ranked. And if we're not, then it needs to be a full tab discussion. And I'm okay with things as they currently stand, as long as staff is comfortable with that.
So to that point, you asked a direct question, I'll try to give you a direct answer. I am not overly concerned, deeply concerned on what projects occupy what rank position. The important thing is, it's in a list,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful that it's prioritized, but that list gives us guidance. The context for making decisions to move forward with a project will vary year over year. And having them, whether a project is ranked number 2 or number 12, does not impair our ability as staff to advocate for that project in response to community feedback we're getting, opportunities for grant funding, input from federal highways or CDOT on interest in their agencies to move forward on a project. So I'm fine with the ranking.
Okay.
If Tab disagrees with the ranking, you should talk about it as a group and come to consensus if you want to change the ranking on something. That's fair game.
Well, thank you for that answers my question, because, yeah, you can use it as
I can
guidance
work
and,
with it
yeah.
regardless of its rank position
Okay,
in the list.
good, that's what I wanted to hear, and I'm happy with those were my 2 questions regarding the plan and the plans, and I'm fine with seeing them move ahead.
Great, thanks.
A quick follow-up on Larry's thing. So I would have thought that it would be easier when you're requesting funding to say, this was our top priority.
It is, there is truth to
Yeah.
that.
So, okay, so where is?
But there's a lot of good projects in there, and so, do we wanna rank on personal preference, do we wanna rank on an established weighting criteria? We opted to create criteria, the ranking falls out according to the criteria, but yeah, I have a stronger request when I can say, that is so important to this community.
Yeah, so it's like if everybody in the room felt like, dealing with pedestrians wandering across in front of McDonald's and, Starbucks, if we need a solution for that desperately, and it should move up into our top two, whatever.
Then talk about, put it on the table
Okay, yeah,
and,
so-
and
okay.
do that,
Just-
yeah.
So there would be benefit
There
if.
is some
if there's-
benefit,
if there's-
it's not
okay.
a deal killer that it's 12 instead of 2, but the reality is.
Thank you.
Grant reviewers are moved by the relative ranking to some degree.
This is tongue in cheek, but I wasn't sure I wanted to sit through another exercise where everybody's given 5 yellow dots and you vote using your dots on the top projects. I wanted to know from staff that if it's in the plan, then it can float and we can look for ways to implement these different, even though it may not be the top one.
Oh, because the alternative would be that when there's a plan that may, or a possibility for dealing with these pedestrians, that the tab would have a specific passionate letter supporting it, and that would take care of the
Yeah,
same
we
problem.
could do that too.
That's an excellent point,
Yeah.
and we utilize that component often. When we get into grant,
Yeah.
we encounter a grant opportunity, we will come back to this tab and say, here's a chance for trail funding for this particular trail. There's 3 or 4 that meet the criteria, does tab have an opinion on which one we should apply for, and are you willing to write a letter of support for the town to apply for the money?
So what I just heard is, it ain't broke, so we don't need to fix it.
Good summary.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's perfect, cause yeah, it may be number 5A on the list, but then the grant funding comes along and then the priorities, we come to you and ask, what's the priority now? And it changes and we can say, yeah, this was 5, but now it's more important because of this, and here's the letter that goes with it.
Thank you.
any other comments?
So are these
About-
2 documents ready to move forward to the town board? I heard a pretty significant omission on the relocation of the transit component. We've talked about that probably every 3 meetings, and I'm asking myself, why hasn't it been moved?
Well, I think they've distilled it, and I don't know if they're down to 3 pages or whatever we talked about, but I will go back to them. I told them yesterday when they were gonna make these editorial changes, wait until tomorrow, I'll have some more for you. So this is good, so I'll just tell them, do this.
So I would be very happy with what we have if there was a short wrapper around it that said, it's good enough, it's not perfect, these are the places where it could be better, but it's not, how do I say it?
Not
That-
fatal, not a deal killer.
Not, thank you, it's not a deal killer, just be aware that these are the imperfections, something like that.
Can you summarize those? Are you prepared to summarize those for Bill to put in the memo, or did you write it up
specific?
and give it to her? or-
Or what's missing, or what you had seen, like you'd expected?
It's my same old rant about all the data going, or much of the data going into it being based on April census data and underrepresenting the needs of our summer population, both
They
workforce and.
Joan, they did explain that, cause I made the same comments, and they responded that because of the process, there's just limited visitor input.
Perhaps they moved that up in the priority, but where it was buried in the document, and I just think it should be front and center in everybody's understanding. So, that's why I was saying a wrapper.
And they did collect comments, but they were from so few people that when you have a response from 1 or 2% of the people that could have an opinion, you wanna always say, if we did the same survey tomorrow, the results would probably be very different if 2 different people dropped out and 2 more people came in. And for some of those comments that we got, that would change how important this thing is. Just 1 or 2 people changed with different people who responded. If we were to do this again in 5 years, I'd ask the consultants to go to places that represent the pie slices of our community. Like, get 50 workers in the room. Get 12, 15 business people in the room, rather than get such a low response rate and think it represents that group.
Good point.
A little bit more effort.
If you're gonna put weight on what, whoever answers that
Yeah.
survey says, knock yourself out to get, 12 workers. We didn't hear much from tourists. It seems like they do a lot of the driving, even if they don't, get any votes or any members on tab. We should probably go find 50 people who come here for Elkfest.
So the caveat would be that the public comments, although they tried hard to get them, did not really represent the spectrum
It
of
was
those
such
who
a
use our
s-
transit.
Yeah, it was
Or
a small
transportation.
sample. It represented not, there's 2 big groups of drivers that were totally unrepresented. The people who come here as vacationers, we didn't get hardly any of them to say anything. And they do a lot of the driving. And the worker population that's here in the summertime, there was none of them, in the survey. And they do some of our most dangerous driving.
Yeah, so we
They
should.
bicycle at night.
Black shirt.
Or what?
Or walk, yeah, they're the ones who jaywalk at night, and if someone gets hit, I don't wanna take, like, final 4 bets on who it's gonna be, but it's gonna be a
What you just did.
tourist or a summer worker that's in the next car crash.
So how do you get that group? That almost sounds like
Or
Offer
like a
free
consultant firm would know how to go get them,
offer
or you
free
could
food and
ask
cover
anyone
group
who's done survey work.
I think the important thing is the letter express some disappointment in the scarcity of representation in the comments.
Yeah.
And that would be an objective to work for in the next update
Yeah.
to improve that,
I like that a lot.
yeah. How do we do it? Well, the big robust discussion is
I know,
gonna come
right?
at it. This is a significant challenge that is, we confront this over and over. Mark's on, he's very passionate about trying to figure out how we can better engage the community in giving us meaningful feedback. It's a big one.
And it just gets more and more hard because everybody's inside of their smaller and smaller bubbles.
Correct.
But then you go to 3 bubbles.
No, now it's 300 because everybody's in an individual. Anyway, sorry.
But
I'll shut up.
if you want the opinion of a Facebook group, your jibber jabbers will tell you, and your other group will tell you.
Assuming it's correct information.
No, well, they'll give you the opinion of that group, they won't necessarily be like the other groups. We live in different tribes who don't, cross groups very much at all.
It's true.
Was there a Spanish version?
No.
Language? So that we didn't do outreach like
No.
in,
In some projects we
People are
have,
living-
this document is so huge, we did not do that.
We
Right or
did.
wrong, we did not.
We did outreach in Spanish with the 2-sided card and
Yes,
we
it was
did.
on the internet
Okay.
But we
site.
didn't create a Spanish version of the document.
No, we did, we had, at
But
the.
now, is it possible to use Google Translate, go ahead and open it up on the webpage, push a button and get it translated into any language?
The whole thing,
I don't know.
I'm not sure. Tables we create challenges in that.
Be a Kate thing.
But I can tell you at the community sessions that they did have an interpreter there for Spanish. So we tried.
yeah.
That was good.
Misty, where do you land on the state of affairs on these documents?
I have read them a lot, cause it was hard for me to figure out what got changed and what didn't, and I didn't wanna miss anything, so I've been through them several times. I really enjoyed reading the feedback that was there. I read through those this morning, and I thought that was really fascinating to see kind of where their head was at. I know at the last meeting that we were here, I knew that they had come in and needed to be reviewed and come back out, so I've been kind of waiting on that. So I thought that was fascinating as far as the theories and the thoughts behind it. I threw Dana a couple of figures and things. They're dumb and small, and we don't have to talk about what's numbered wrong, but no, I think they're great.
Would you advocate for the board to approve these?
I would support these documents, yes.
Okay.
And I probably wouldn't have before, but I like it. And Larry did a lot of work, so it's good. I learned a lot.
Any other feedback that Belle should weave into her first draft? You feel like you have enough to write from?
And also, I was wondering, like, I remember some comments, from you, like some of the, may be leaning too much towards pedestrian and cyclist.
Overall,
Does that,
true.
do you feel like,
I don't think that any of that has really changed that I noticed, but as far as, that's more about kind of our project list, which is really the point of the whole document, you're right. And so, when you're talking about this community and how limited we are with bicycling in the community, meaning people that are flying here and renting cars are not bringing their bicycles. I know I have been told that the Mountain Shop is diminishing their bicycle rental program.
really?
Not getting away with it, but much less bicycles this year. And so when there's not really a ton of options, I could see somebody wanting to rent a bike to go around the lake or something that's easy. I felt like dollar for dollar, if you compared the quantity of bicycles versus vehicles and the families that are here, dollar for dollar, it feels very skewed in favor of the bicycles. I think it's important for Estes Park to become mindful and supportive of bicycling and being able to cycle around as locals, but there's, 6,000 of us, or if you wanted to say, let's say 10,000 of us that actually live here, and to spend that much money on projects focused on bicycles seems very skewed when we're talking about 5 million visitors to the park annually. I do think it's important, if I could give an explanation of not one of our projects, if it was just an idea, I think it would be important. Here, this came up last week, it didn't have any weight or bearing or anything official, but, not last week, last meeting. But the idea of putting in a bike lane on Highway 34 that's a dramatic example. But my stance on that would be, if they were redoing Highway 34, then I feel like we could or should push to include the bike lane be included. But do we really want to spend money to add a bike lane to something, and create its whole own project just for bicycles? I think the focus should be more on including bicycles in the plans than focusing on bicycles, if that makes sense. I'm not advocating for or against the 34 thing, it's just, again, the dramatic example and point of view.
Widening the canyon might be expensive.
Yeah, exactly, and the businesses, they don't want that canyon closed, so that's not really what I'm talking about, it's just the concept of what it's painting the picture of our dollars for bicycle specific projects versus vehicles.
And what, the main people I know in town are retired geezers who moved here recently. And when they hear I'm on tab, the first thing they say is, I want a sidewalk so I can walk for exercise. I want a bike path so I can walk and ride my bike. I'd like to be able to go downtown, walking or biking. They're here, most of them year-round, but they're also, their other comment is, I'm terrified I'm gonna hit a pedestrian or a bicyclist because they come out of nowhere, and they, that's what it looks like to an old person who's new in town. And they're terrified of hitting elks too. So, they'd like to drive to the library on a bad night, but all of them would like to once a week be able to ride their bike or walk and to not hit people. That's the thing they're scared of. That there's gonna be a worker in the night walking on the side of the highway, or people who are downtown after 9 o'clock at night, and they'll hit one of them. So, they are primarily drivers. but they worry about pedestrians and bicyclists, both because they're participants, or they wanna do it once in a while, but also because they're just scared of the edge of all of our roads are pretty tight, and there's always gonna be somebody that you don't see. You know, so it's not like they're driver people versus biker people, it's the same people on, you know, both of those concerns.
For safety, I would always advocate for sidewalks,
Yes,
but maybe even higher than like added bike lanes, stuff like that.
I certainly agree with you there, I'd rather have a sidewalk everywhere,
Agreed.
than a bike trail that goes to the middle of the woods to someplace nobody goes.
Perfect word.
But there are places, where, you know, you can kind of compromise between those.
Mm-hmm.
So do you support, the document, both, you know, as one, but,
I don't think that we're overemphasizing pedestrians and cyclists because those are also drivers. In fact, I don't know any cyclists who don't sometimes drive. And most of the people that drive downtown would like to be able to walk safely home or around downtown. So I mean, when I saw safety as a priority and weighted whatever it is, 20%, that's understanding it to me, you know, safety should be first solved before I worry about 5 minutes faster getting somewhere. And I think we're gonna repeat this document on some basis. And as we go on, we may be able to balance, you know, the, priority on safety and other driver interests.
I'm always astonished by the whole sort of, when you build it, they come.
yeah.
And whether that's more lanes on the freeway or more bicycle paths or anything. And then on top of that, with all the e-bikes are just transforming the way a lot of people approach,
Yeah.
at least local transportation. And so in 5 years, we're gonna be looking at a whole new universe. And I'm really interested in seeing how that's gonna be.
Do you think this plan, captures it up to 2045?
Oh, God, no.
No.
I mean, we're lucky if it captures it to 2030, but
I
that's.
agree.
Is it
And
2030?
from the new retirees moving up here, some of them are just as unhealthy and about to drop dead as the old batch. But there's bunches of these new people who just retired at 60-something. And they wanna walk, they wanna ride their bike, they wanna do stuff. They're more active than past retirees. And I think that trend will continue for at least a little while. So those, you know, those people are gonna be concerned about the opportunity for recreation. Like, you know, the people in Newcomers, they say, why aren't there bike racks
Downtown.
at destinations? Hopefully that's gonna come up in one of our budget categories, where we can afford to award a bike rack to a destination.
Okay, so I'm hearing approval.
Yeah, I would,
Okay.
Colorful.
I would add, I agree that, I feel like we've, I don't know, massaged it, I feel like the process that we've gone through was, pretty robust, and I really appreciated early on how, it was out there for the mapping, for people to put comments on, people could really dig in. I think it was interesting, we did hear from groups, while limited, small portion, of citizen engagement, there still was a sway towards cyclists, and I feel like it did kind of reflect our lack of infrastructure, so, it just seemed like, it was good to hear from, the populations, and I feel like it was pretty clear, the emphasis on safety, and, I appreciated the revisions that kept coming, later, and also I liked the comment as well, the explanation of the consultant's work, they were thinking of, directly from our comments that we put in there. I was a little discouraged at I felt like the consultants were a little disconnected though, and I can compare that to other, plans that we've done with even Kimley Horn, that, I felt like they just seemed like really on it, immediate. This year, at this time, it felt like they weren't there. I didn't know where they were. And so I felt a little frustrated by that, in their response, I guess. And maybe it had to do with the budget, or, I think there was some complexity around that and why. But, so maybe, if the town in the future wants to, revise this and look at this sort of plan or others, that maybe, it might be valuable to put a little more money into it. So maybe it will help the process go a little faster. And maybe a little deeper as far as like doing outreach in the community. And maybe, going to pockets and meeting with specific groups and having liaisons who could really get in there in those pockets of community and hear what is their priority, what is their concern, what are they thinking about. And then finally, I really, the transit part, is what a relief. It just seems like it's been such a mystery of how to solve engagement and ridership. And I feel like this is a good step, like the micro part of it, that's a huge step for Estes Park, will be. So that I find that really exciting. And I felt like you got some good comments around that. And now implementation. Let's see. I think that's really, there's a range of age groups that represent Estes Park. There's the 8-year-old all the way to the 80-year-old, and I think that the 80-year-olds, 70-year-olds are very active and healthy, and they do want safe alternatives. And like at the Estes Park Running Club, like I have 85-year-olds and an 86-year-old, that they're there every week, and they're like wandering around, and they really appreciate the sidewalks, and because they're slower, getting around. It doesn't mean they're not active. And like one of them is a national champion of triathlon. I mean, she's nationally ranked every year. And she's here in Estes Park. So anyhow, I feel like there is kind of customers, residents that I feel like the multimodal has really captured. I feel like it's a good step on their behalf, so, including students. So, yeah. So I approve it. Can it always be improved on? Yeah, I think you're right. It's probably good enough for maybe it'll get us up to 2030, and then the whole thing's gonna explode and be totally different. You know me, I don't know. But, okay. This, right. I did hear from, let's see, there were a couple of, I did hear from Kristen and Linda, and I could read out loud. They're kind of short. I mean, it's just about their comment about the plan. Kristen said, "Hi Val, unfortunately I will be unable to attend spring break." Let's see. Let me see, where was that? Let me see. She's in favor of supporting the transit development plan. I think it was well done, and the 5-year plan recommended seems like a great route forward for trying to improve and/or build a transit system in Estes Park. The multimodal part, transportation plan, is a little tougher. Did see, did we see responses and comments? She hadn't seen that yet, I don't think. So she was inquiring if there were any comments, and
Okay.
so, but she felt like, she would approve it, the plans. And then Linda, let's see. Some of these are about parking and, some like, let's see. She felt like the multimodal plan was good, especially since there's 3.4 million visitors in 2014. And then now, 10 years later, it's gone up to 4.2 million visitors. And we need to have a plan and we need to have, connectivity, so.
Okay. Anything from her on the TDP or?
She didn't say anything,
Okay.
but she did, we gotta keep working at Gridlock, we need to find solutions, and this will be one factor, including, she was saying, paid parking, the loop, and this multimodal plan in transit.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Anything, next steps for that then? I guess you covered.
No, I think next steps are,
Yeah.
Greg articulated it well. If we
Yeah.
can get if you guys can all work on that draft and that
Okay.
letter by the next meeting, that'd be fantastic. And I'll start working on getting this on the town board agenda for the
Okay.
22nd. It's gonna be a long meeting. Once I get to my update, I'll tell you why.
You're on.
It's your turn.
All right, first, apologies for the controversy surrounding not asking you guys for a letter. Trust me, I won't do that again in the future. As the employee stuck in the middle of all this, know that I worked really hard to do the right thing with integrity and commitment to great service. Just know that, okay? All right. On to my update, let's see. So next week at the town board study session, 2 things on the agenda for that we're gonna discuss. One is public or parking ordinance updates, so public comment, a press release went out yesterday, and that is at estes.org/parking. Go a little bit down the list and you'll see where those ordinance updates are. What they're mainly focused on is the municipal code for 10.04.040 related to overnight parking. The gist is, if you park overnight anywhere in town, you're a criminal, because you're breaking the law. So the plan is to relax that for areas except for the downtown commercial zoning district and the public parking lots, so that those that live at Graves or Third or other areas of town will be able to park with, for 48 hours, up to 48 hours without breaking any laws. So we're gonna talk about that with the board next week. The other one was 10.04.030 relative to parking prohibited, which includes things like, parking 12 inches from the curb, or parking the wrong direction from the direction of travel, or sticking out too far from a parking space and impeding the traffic lane, things like that. So if you go to the estes.org/parking, again, go a little bit down on the first page, you'll see where that is. And what we did was took the current ordinance and the proposed changes and made the proposed changes red, so it's very obvious what we're gonna talk about. So make sure folks know about that. The other one is our policy 842, which is our permits. And we're gonna make an update to that relative to overnight parking in the commercial loading, or the commercial downtown district as well. We have a permit called I'm gonna say this wrong, but it's business permit commercial loading. And currently, that permit has a provision that allows for overnight parking. It just says overnight parking. What we're gonna do is move that from overnight parking in the commercial business district to the event center for those companies that want to purchase that permit. We'll also go over options with them. It affects, I wanna say 4 or 5 different groups, and I'm individually talking to each of those groups and letting them know we're doing this. So the plan is to take this to the board for study session, these 2 items, at the next meeting, and then we will schedule, again, at the April 22nd meeting, to take this to the town board for approval, which would then trigger the 30-day ordinance requirement, so then those would start in time for the paid parking season on May 22nd. Okay, we're exploring a name change to one of the parking lots, to be consistent with the other lot names and local landmarks, so thinking of, we're gonna present this also to the town board to change the lot that's called Post Office to Baldwin Park Lot. So it would be more consistent with our naming conventions of landmarks. Then we'd have one more lot to do after that.
So Bighorn doesn't apply to car horns?
It doesn't. And Elkhorn, I don't understand because,
Down to Hammers.
And don't tell me it applies to the Bighorn Restaurant, so we have to rename it because it associates with the private.
Refers to one
They
restaurant.
changed the name of the restaurant.
exactly.
But there is a problem with changing names, as we discovered, people will continue to call it by the old name
That is
for
correct.
a long time.
That is
Till we
correct.
can get
Dairy
the
Queen
post
Lot
office
Davis,
out of
yes.
downtown.
Exactly.
I think of Dairy Queen Lot, when I came out here in
Yeah.
2005 and did a
Dairy
study, I
Queen
think
Lot.
the Davis lot was called Dairy Queen at the time, so, yeah.
Oh, it still
But that
is.
way, everyone knew where it was.
Exactly, or the Donut House Loop, you know,
It's
it's,
gonna be, yeah, that's gonna be
Things like
confusing
that.
for a while.
Donut
but
house.
it's kind of the right thing to do to make these more consistent with
Consistent,
the
yeah.
landmarks or streets or something
Well,
besides that.
another consideration is there's intentionally or unintentionally a component of perceived ownership when we use the term post office parking lot. And that has created some operational challenges for our interactions with the Federal Postal Service.
Yeah.
Alright, ready for me to fly through these last four? I'm gonna go fast, okay? For transit bus stand gas, this is operating again this year, no charge to the town, $15 round trips. They're gonna have 2 out and back buses, 41 days in the 2025 weekends. Upper Front Range TPR MMOF grants, say that 3 times fast. We have 2 projects that were approved and we're working on the funding timing for those. Those are the Moraine Avenue Trail design and the 26-27 transit operations. Our team worked really hard to get those done and they're great grant opportunity because the match is 0. Okay.
Let us do
CMAC
it.
IGA was received by CDOT late last week. This is the one that this is the 2023 award. We're just getting the document, so I don't know that I'm gonna be able to put all those things in action by the time this season starts. Luckily, when we wrote that, we put an extra year in it, so the expiration will be next year. So if we can't do all of those plans based on just getting the TDP going and the timing of this, we can move that into next year. Those funds no portion of those funds lapse, so.
Sweet.
Yeah, that was good. Go NoCo 34, meetings are continuing. I'm the treasurer, so it's awesome. And what they're doing is they have a great LinkedIn campaign. So if you're on LinkedIn, go on Go NoCo 34 and see all their fun things they're doing. Transit Tuesday and Fun Fact Friday. All right. ZEB Fleet Transition Plan, that's underway with the consultant. We've met twice already to discuss the technical aspects of the plan. The next step is a workshop with stakeholders. I will update Chair Morris on that calendar date when we get that established in the next couple weeks. The plan is to take that to the technical stakeholder group, which is more like the RAP-PDEV or Motive with the EV trolleys, the folks that help us with those, and then they're gonna put that plan together. The next one I have is Bighorn Parking Garage Design Contract is set to go to town board again on 4/22, but that will happen after the budget amendment is approved, so there's some funding things that we have to do in order before we can take that to the board for consideration of the design. And then shuttle routes, we're looking at some modifications to the routes, mainly the red route and obviously the brown route and the gold route that will have some different or additional stops. And we're gonna try to do that and get all that planned out just in time for, traffic routes and safety concerns and make sure that we can take some of these modifications in this plan.
You see them as pilots or no?
For year 1, yeah,
A pilot?
because
program?
we'll have to just establish ridership and see if they
Yeah.
make sense to do those, but one of the plans is to take the brown, red, and gold, which always has, but have them go through that Stanley Circle area, which then cuts out that left turn out of the visitor
Yeah.
center,
Oh,
And one of the things that they identified in this plan was that a lot of people that ride the red route wanna go to the Stanley anyway, so it makes perfect sense.
oh,
Yeah, and then, you know, probably a stop up by the Weast bathrooms because of the new roundabout, you know, that brings the shuttle back around or the trolley back around. And then some additional stops on the Brown route coming back into town on Moraine.
great.
Yeah. I took more time than I thought, but there you go.
Did anyone have any comments or, these going in the right direction? Okay. All right. Engineering updates.
The town board on February 11th approved a design contract with JUB Engineering to give us construction drawings to upgrade the asphalt trails along Highway 7 and along US 34. $500,000 design contract to that. Once the strategy is to get the design for the upgrades done. The upgrades will include remedying the ADA nonconformities on that asphalt path. It'll address driveway crossings, street crossings, a lot of things. And the implementation of that design will have to be phased over time. It's gonna be expensive.
Yeah. And
So
we
that's in
see,
motion.
we see them remaining as asphalt paths?
I'm anticipating we're gonna convert them to concrete paths, but we can talk about it.
Yeah.
But this
yeah,
would be a while before it's
Yeah,
done.
yeah,
Pick
yeah,
out.
yeah.
Are
Oh,
they-
that's
If we can
pretty
get the
easy.
design done this year,
Yeah,
there is one segment we'd like to address in 2025. I have to double check the strategic plan to see if we had that for 25 or 26. But I am anticipating that we're gonna have a project every year or every other year, depending on cost, over until 2034, which is when the funding sunsets for
Okay.
trail maintenance.
great.
That's in motion.
That's
Cleve
robust.
Street, a lot of activity happening on Cleve. The update, we could do an update every day and it would be new and fresh every day. So my suggestion there is sign up to receive the email updates is the best way to get the updates on Cleve. The contractor is pouring concrete and we're in active dialogue with TDS on some more utility relocations. I'm gonna stop there for details. The bigger item I wanna mention is, I give credit to our mayor. He received some citizen feedback, some concern about difficulty crossing Highway 7 in the vicinity of the Holiday Inn, First Street, Second Street,
Yep.
Third Street, in that area, Graves. He reached out to Heather Paddock, the Region 4 Transportation Director at CDOT, and she made an assignment to our resident engineer, Gina Fox, to hire a consultant to do a study. What are the pedestrian crossing needs on Highway 7 from First Street out to Graves? They have prepared a draft study, submitted to us. Our staff has read through it. I invited Gina to come to the April meeting, and she agreed, she's willing to come. She requested the 1 o'clock time slot on the agenda, and she'd like to talk about this study with you all.
Great.
That's exciting, cause it is.
There's just to give you a sneak preview, one of the recommendations is consider a road diet. And instead of having 2 lanes going each direction, get rid of one of those lanes and have an on-street bike lane that's actually buffered from the vehicles. And so, it'll be a good discussion, I think.
And that's
That's a beautiful vision.
There it is.
Yep,
all right.
thank you for saying that,
You
Lane.
bet.
Yeah.
Everyone has it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, read through it between now and then and come prepared with some good topical discussion with Gina.
So I'm glad they're open to hearing Transportation Advisory Board, because I know it's not always easy
Yeah, now
for
understand,
CDOT.
it's a study, this is not design, this is not construction, this is a study to identify need, and from that need study, hopefully a project or series of projects will birth out of that. CDOT will eventually, hopefully, find funding for the projects, and when it gets funded, then it'll go to design, then it'll go to construction. So those would be the opportunities, the kind of the journey that it'll be a multi-year journey. Be patient with it, but don't lose track of it either.
I know this is only limited to just like the very end of Highway 7, but there's a lot of problems further up where a road diet would really help and feel a whole lot safer.
You can bring that comment, realize the bigger we make the vision, the more we
Yeah, the
dilute
longer-
getting action on some of the.
Oh, no, it wouldn't be to dilute it, it would be to, just have the larger vision so that in the future, when we're talking about plans up there, that would be a part of it.
Yeah, like Lexington Lane,
Sure.
it's been brought up. and- yeah.
Feel free to bring that commentary.
yeah.
I
But
have
if
a
you were gonna
very,
bet on a
Wait a second.
casualty, go ahead.
I have a very quick related comment. We were concerned about pedestrian crossings beyond Graves, as you were mentioning, but, we were thinking about the Prospector, the new Prospector Apartments, and that pedestrian crossing there.
Yep.
I think they were expecting to be fully occupied by this time, but I've continued to communicate with them. They are only about a third occupied, and so I'll reach out to them again before the school year to see how many children, school-age children there are. But the bus stops there, and they think now about 6 students get on the bus. And I like that solution because they don't then have to cross the highway. It precludes them walking or riding a bike, so perhaps that can be addressed in the future, but just wanted to give you an update on the Prospector Apartments. They're far from being fully occupied.
I was just gonna say,
Go ahead.
this is one of the most dangerous places. I think if someone gets hurt, 7 up to Graves, that's a good bet as to where it's gonna happen. So if we make any progress there at all, that could save somebody's day being ruined.
Thank you for the work on the sidewalk over by the rec center. It's been
Yeah.
fun watching them redo that. It's
Yeah,
very well
Thank you
done.
for that comment, appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I
Our
enjoy
guys
that.
were very excited to do that in-house and expand their skill set a little bit,
Yeah.
test themselves, can we do this or not? We think we can,
It's been
let's
fun
give it a
watching them in the
try.
mornings, so.
That's a good example of an asphalt to concrete conversion.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it needed it there.
I don't feel like I have closure on a topic that's on the agenda that we skipped, and it's the 2025 paid parking. We had a big discussion. Did I hear that this group does not want to craft any document to take to the town board soon, and instead, we'll pick up this conversation again in the context of the 2026 program?
I think that would be,
What I heard was, we were gonna delay, that there are other topics, but I could be.
there was
Well, that's why
no point in writing the letter of support when it's already
Well,
approved
I think
to hash it out
there
now.
is a value in clearing up that, because it was the same parking program and the same rates, we did not have a vote on it. And, that this was not a case of a negative opinion of the board not being communicated, that we just, as far as I see it, it was the same program that been there for years, same parking spots, same rates. We failed to take a vote on it because it was the same. As opposed, so that trustee Brown can at least hear, we didn't disagree and wanna close down parking and forget to tell you that.
It was intentional in some ways.
Yeah, and I don't care if it says it's, 4-3 or whatever, I would like something to go back to the board.
Yeah.
for
I think you
this
wanna be
year's
very careful how
program.
you put it though, because we don't
Yeah.
wanna disrespect
That's
Misty
right.
and Carissa and their
No.
new, perspectives. And that it's just that basically, it was like, sorry, we were so busy, we just didn't get to it yet. I think that's perhaps the simplest way to deal with it.
And we're looking forward to those conversations. When would it be appropriate? Probably fall, right? Like around the time that we get the,
Well,
this is what happened at
I see
2024.
two paths,
2025.
two options for us here. We can bring closure to this by taking that 2023 memo and editing it. Each person can bring edits back, this group can talk about the edits, and it can be reproduced for the context of 2025, and that could be done soon if you wanted to. That's one path. The other path is, the ship has sailed. We aired our grievances. We're not gonna go back and spend any more time on it, but we know in 2026, there's gonna be a more significant conversation. Because we're gonna have
That is how I feel.
we're gonna talk about servicing debt for a new parking structure.
Right.
And that would take us logically into the phase 3 of the downtown parking management plan, which is an expansion or modification of paid parking. So we could reserve the conversation to that context, have that in the fall. By ordinance, staff has an obligation to bring the parking rates to the town board for consideration no later than March 15th of the new year. So we have from now till March 15th to take a position and give a recommendation to the town board. I'd see, if we go down that, we have to have that conversation, and I think we should have it in the fall, when Dana's
After
parking
paid
program is
parking's
done,
done.
he reports what we learned in 2025, and then we
Open
pivot into
discussion.
where we going in 2026.
Well, and part of that to me is the opinion of probable cost for the garage, if the
Yes.
design gets approved,
Would
so.
be-
Well, but,
They're
and,
complementary.
We'll have numbers.
and if
So-
we convince the trustees to end paid parking on the ground, only a real chump would park on the top floor of the new garage, and only a misguided attempt would build a garage that no one will park in, because all parking is free from now on anywhere.
Well, it's not even an option to build a new structure until we have a funding solution. Logically, the chunk of change to build it is gonna be a loan. And then we have to repay the loan over time, and we can repay it with increased revenue from paid parking, or we can modify how we spend general fund money and redirect it towards that debt service. Those are the two logical paths
Oh,
that
no,
I
we
see.
could propose a new sales tax on
Good-
fuel that
good-
would pay for it.
Could do it that way too.
Alright, but it seems like the decision to end paid parking forever is very well tied to building another parking garage. And those two things need to be decided deliberately.
I think that's the future conversation that staff is certainly gonna have. I'm confident TAB's gonna be an integral part of that conversation. And it should be in the fall, between October and 1st of March. So October, November, December, January, February. We got a couple months in there where we could do it. So-
Current paid parking system.
So we
is
could
over.
leave 2025 where it is now and just turn our attention there, or we can come back and bring closure to the 2025 issues of the last 2 weeks.
I think two of the trustees asked for us to send some communication.
But that was before they
No, that was
voted.
before they voted. They were pushing to delay to the next board
That was-
meeting until we met.
Right.
But that was not
I
voted into
kinda
that.
heard Brown asking
Yes, but that was
for an
before,
answer,
that was
even if it
before they
passed.
voted.
Yeah, and I think that may be why he voted no, because he
Yeah.
didn't have
He said
an
that.
opinion
Right.
from
That's what it
staff.
said.
That's what he
And
said.
I think it would be reasonable to say, we didn't vote for it or against it.
We haven't actually
No,
had
we
the full
haven't.
conversation.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And I don't wanna add that
And
into the
And
time.
that's
Or
the
at least
question,
both
do
Yeah.
you wanna have the conversation? Yes or no?
I
Not,
would
not
pref-
with it already
I
voted.
would prefer to wait
I
for
prefer.
the
So
next
just
year.
don't reply to either that request.
So
Well, Greg can
all the
communicate.
comments that we got from the board and affected parties, we've taken to heart, and we will consider that when we have the next conversation in the last quarter of 2025.
Perfection.
Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Dana, can you live with that?
I'm trying to think if I said
I just
anything
felt
where I
bad
said I
too.
would bring something or I would work on that, I don't wanna say
Well,
something.
we worked on it, we had a discussion with Tab, and the Tab's preference was to pick up this conversation in the context of the 2026 season.
And we could write that in the town board.
We can put that, yeah,
Yeah.
they,
Yeah, that's perfect.
Because
Does that work?
nothing's gonna change, and we'd rather really save it for when we really can have a robust conversation that's informative.
Yeah, that's,
Save it, yeah.
He's trying
Not
to
gonna
shock.
Okay.
He's trying to shock the room.
Alright, we are past time. There wasn't any, we reviewed the public comment, but not from past, which there weren't anything. Any
there
other
was
business?
Jones.
Joan?
Your email? Yeah, so,
Oh,
last month I had, reported the public comment from the bar about driving home drunk and wishing that they could get permission to park overnight instead of having to drive home drunk. And, and so I was looking very carefully at the new, overnight parking regulations that Dana was proposing. And what I saw in there, was there's no flexibility in the way it's written to give latitude for these kinds of public safety considerations. And that the second piece of that is that the table of knowledge at the bar suggested a solution, which would be that bartenders essentially could hand out a little permission to park overnight sticker that you can take one, placard that you can put on your dashboard, and then the town parking people could ignore your car for like, you know, the 12 hours of the period that you had permission to park.
you too can buy one of those from
Well-
the bartender.
Well, no, not even, no,
I would.
that it's just a simple solution. I mean, that was
tell
one,
you
one.
that the
proposal.
officers use a lot of, you know, there's officer discretion in those. And in a lot of cases, the first night would be like a warning or something, but
Yeah.
that I can't definitively say that because it's not in there, but I can tell you officer discretion is definitely used.
But I was just wondering if there was some way of wording the ordinance in such a way that there's a little bit of latitude, because as soon as you say never cannot, then you're tying your hands.
But then you have people that like start living there, you know,
Well,
that's
so-
what they're trying to avoid. But I thought of you and I was so grateful, cause I confess I went to Dead Guy Days downtown, but not everybody has 2 teenagers that you can call to take your car home.
Exactly.
So,
Anyway,
but I
so
thought
that was the
Joe
follow-up.
did
so right.
My follow-up.
And if there was a spot or two reserved for the person that went home overnight, it would have to be like that restroom pass in high school
Yeah.
that you have to return to the teacher
Yeah,
the next
Good
morning.
luck, I can tell you right now.
Because otherwise, gradually everyone in the bar will own one of those overnight passes.
Well, no, but if it's like dated, you know, just
Yeah, they
like
have to
the
be dated.
parking sticker you get when you pull it, anyway, that there, so the suggestion was that there should be some flexibility in the way that ordinance is, the ordinance should be worded that you retain some flexibility to do things in the name of public safety, something like that.
Yeah, I hear the suggestion, if you look throughout the municipal code, things are defined, this is permitted and this is not permitted, it's black and white, that's what codes do. The discretion comes in the enforcement side of the implementation.
And there,
So to make one component of the municipal code kind of discretionary and loose, and other components are not, I would invite the town attorney to speak to us about the problems that
Oh,
they
okay.
bring.
and then one of the things on the flip side of that, there are some laws, and I don't know about city ordinances, but there are laws for the state that say that officers have no discretion. So when there's like certain domestic violence situations, whatever,
Yeah.
they will say the officer has no discretion, this must occur, whether the officer thinks it's legitimate or not. When we lived in Kansas, you had to have an insurance card. There was 0 discretion for an insurance card in your vehicle if you got pulled over. This may be black and white, but because it does not state that there is no discretion allowed, it does give the officer some leeway to choose whether to
Interesting.
do it or not do it.
Okay,
So, sorry, random knowledge over here.
Is there any anxiety that we're not talking about a tabbed comment letter pertaining to this ordinance change? We view this as operational, it's not programmatic. It's kind of down here in the implementation weeds, not up here in the philosophies of transportation. I'm not hearing any angst on that, is what I'm
Alright, any other business then? We're
We're adjourned.
We are adjourned.
Thank you
Thank you for
all
the delay.
for being
17
willing to
minutes.
speak your mind and your hearts and doing it
Yep.
respectfully. It's important to have openness and transparency. There's a little bit of storming here as this group normalizes, but it's good. I think it is good.
Misty, I am really sorry, I
Thank
had
you all.
no idea.
Thank you.
And I didn't
Thank
know you wanted to
you.
close that down.
No, you're.
I
And you have
never-
some
I've
great
never
ideas
heard- I
there.
mean, you've
Yeah,
heard
but
from a
you're-
bunch of people, I've never heard from anyone
You have
who was
a
against
really
it being there,
thoughtful
cause we all
perspective,
got
John.
our, 2-hour free
Even when you
ticket.
send all those letters to all
Yeah.
those.
And everybody I know is like, I don't wanna go downtown
I
for
think you
2
do.
hours.